The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the Aquest Podcast, do hit subscribe and make sure to like and share as well. On this episode of the Aquest Podcast, we are stepping a little bit outside of the usual and regular bounds of regulation and compliance, and we're going to chat about business strategy. So we're thinking about how firms, professional services firms or financial services firms, how they approach strategizing their business, thinking about their customers and thinking about their staff. And to do that, I'm delighted to be joined by Annette Mahon. Annette is a commercial strategy and business development consultant who works exclusively with service providers and financial and fund services businesses. Now, Annette has many years of experience in this area of business strategy, originally with professional services firms and now more lately very much so focused on financial services. And I'm always really interested to get the views of somebody who has come into the financial services and funds industry more recently with that level of experience to see what is it that they see, what do they see that's good and what do they see that could be improved. So we have a very interesting discussion around all of those topics. And we do have a particular piece around Irish businesses that are part of international groups and how they approach understanding their stakeholders and integrating themselves within that group to make sure that the group understands and knows them and they know and understand the group. So really interesting part of the conversation included there. And on that note, let's get on with the podcast.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hi Annette, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Hello, Danny. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, as I said when we were chatting before preparing for this podcast, I really enjoy having guests come onto the podcast where they're not necessarily born and bred into the funds industry, but come from a different perspective and then can give us, as people who are immersed in the industry and can get a little bit blind to what we see, give us the benefit of what you see. So again, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Let's
Thank you, Danny.
with Annette, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is, what your expertise is, and how you've managed to meander or wander or otherwise end up in the funds industry?
Thank you, Danny. Well, actually, my own background is I was based in the US for 20 years, and my background was primarily marketing, business development, strategy, planning. So I was in New York. I worked for one of the largest global agencies, all in business development, marketing. And then I went to a smaller agency. And then I set up my own business in New York, where we represented European primarily companies going into the US market. I moved back to Ireland in 2004 and continued doing that. So I would have worked, always as an independent consultant, helping companies to develop their commercial strategy, to find new clients, grow existing clients, and then putting commercial structures around that.
And so, what kind of businesses were they in at? What sectors were they in?
Primarily, it was always in the services business, so professional services. So it would be a lot of the service providers. I work with a lot of the law firms, accounting firms, the Big Four. And that's really where you asked me how I meandered into the funds industry. That was when I was working with PwC, and I worked with the asset management team, and I have to credit Andy O'Callaghan and Marie O'Connor and Ken Owens, who taught me everything that I know about the funds industry. So it was just a really
big names there. Yes, the good teachers.
Big names, and they were just the best, and there were plenty of others as well. But it was just, you know what it is? It was just such a nice group. It was such a fun industry, and then there was the growth of the Irish funds and how the whole business emerged. So it was just a great business to be in. And anything I've learned in the business, I certainly learned there.
I wanted to come on to that in a second, but just go back a step. I wonder, when you're advising European businesses, professional services firms entering into the US market, what kind of things do you tell them? What is it that they need to watch out for? How is it different?
Well, a lot of the time, it's interesting, Danny, because a lot of the time the companies here are part of a network, or they're they're headquartered, or they will have their main operations and decision making from the US, or indeed from other parts of Europe. So a lot of the work that I do with clients is working with them to help them leverage that network. How do we leverage the network and the access that we have internationally to focus on our business here? And really, that's a role of just connecting the dots. It can be a role of literally going through who are our international clients, who are we working for, who do we need to talk to, and what benefit can we bring to them from here. So while we do that and business comes in here, it's just taking that strategic, proactive approach so that we're targeting the business that's right for us here. So
that goes both ways in that. Then if I was an Irish business looking to enter the US market, I'd be connections I have and that kind of thing.
Yes, and certainly for some clients that I've worked with, looking at the US market, it would be really on, well, where do we focus? So say if you're not part of a network, some companies here are not part of a major international network, or they may not have that in the US. It is really looking at the different markets, where are the opportunities, where's the global footprint, who are the key contacts, and how do we put that together? And once you have that done, you identify the opportunities, then what kind of a proposition do we put around that specifically for this market? Because a lot of the companies, certainly in the funds industry, they're either going to go to Ireland or they'll go to Luxembourg. And while naturally we always try to wear the Ireland hat, we still have to be, we still have to make the proposition relevant to the specific clients that we're meeting. And I think that just takes a lot of time and practice to get that right.
And so then, having done this, I guess, with the professional services firms, you gravitated towards the fund industry. You mentioned your colleagues in PwC that you worked with. So how did that kind of come about or manifest, or where has that led you?
Well, it led me to looking, well, first of all, because at PwC there would be such a strong network. So, and again, because it's such a large organization, a lot of the time it was about connecting the dots and looking at where were the opportunities and what kind of value could we deliver. But equally, Danny, for some of the funds businesses that are here, that have operations in the US or that may not have any operations. I worked with a client recently from Europe who did not have any operations in the US, but it was just to create a roadmap for them. So to say, well, what is the best approach and how do we target this market? So things like we would do a commercial audit of the main team here. We'd look at, well, what are the business growth strategies that we need to target this market? Because it's not just a matter of saying, well, we just need to find new clients and off we go. There's a whole, choosing which business growth strategy you use is a really high stakes decision. And that takes time because it could be through partnerships. It could be through like new services and new business, or it could be through existing business. So that has to be decided. Then the next step would be, we'd look at, well, what's the marketing strategy that we used to reach that? What tools, what techniques, and how do we go about it? And then it's interesting because in the consumer marketplace, you primarily use these go-to-market strategies. How do we actually go to the market? But more and more professional services firms are now adopting that. And it could be with how do we develop the clients when we get them on board? What kind of programs do we put in place? The consulting firms do this very, very well. It's something I can see that the fund, that would be very relevant for the fund industry as well.
And so the funds industry type businesses that you work with, I guess some are professional services, but maybe some are financial services business as well.
Exactly.
That are delivering these services to their own clients.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens is that a lot of the time what I find in professional services, the main managing growth and managing how you grow that business is probably the biggest challenge, because most professions, now whether they're fund managers or lawyers or accountants or whatever, they're just so busy. They just do not have the time. So they don't have the time to actually say, well, how, what do our clients really think? What do they value? What's going on? What kind of strategy should we use? So what I do, what I like to think I do anyway, what I aim to do is to help them create a structure and put a focus structure around that. And then with that, to bring a fresh approach to how we go about, growing our business. So that's in both fund services and in professional services. And then on the other side of it, it's looking at the client insights. How well do we know our clients? And like what's happening is that the landscape for how and why buyers buy, or why they use us, or why fund managers may choose to work with us, or why a firm and a fund setting up here will choose me as their service provider. So how and why they buy and why they choose us, it's changing all the time. So by speaking to your clients and actually taking a proactive approach, you can really, anticipate emerging needs or something that's going on in the background, that maybe your competitors won't know about. And that allows you to create, a high margin service that's aimed specifically at the client because you took the time. It'll also allow you to prospect, opportunities, what's new. It'll test your brand strength. What do they think of us? Because what we think they think and what they think can be completely different. And then it also, you can discover then what they really value, because sometimes it's not what we think.
Yeah,
so and insights is very important.
Yeah, those conversations with your customers can be very, very interesting and insightful, because, as you said, what you think they think can be completely different to what they think about you, and what you think they want can be very different to what they want. And I'm wondering, from those conversations, have you, had interesting insights, maybe kind of not so much firm specific, but why they choose Ireland over another jurisdiction? Because we all have our own ideas as to why that might be. But I think in those conversations, they say, well, actually, I didn't realize that was why somebody would choose Ireland over another country.
Well, one of the things that surprised me is that a lot of certainly in the clients that they were jurisdiction neutral. That certainly came out in some of the discussions that we had. And the thing that tipped them over, it was always the soft elements. It wasn't always about the money or about the regulation, or sometimes it can be this. No, don't get me wrong, they play a huge part in it. But a lot of it is, do they like and trust who we like and trust and who we can work with? And I really do believe that the Irish connection plays a huge part as well. The green jersey, if the person has a connection to Ireland, I think that's really, really important. And I have to say, organisations like Irish Funds, but certainly the government organisations like IDA and Enterprise Ireland are hugely supportive of funds and organisations setting up here. So there's a lot of supports around for that, and I think that helps them too.
And I guess if you are a buyer, you're choosing your jurisdiction, you can kind of assume at this stage a very high level of competence and level of professional ability to deliver the product that you want to build, and the network of tax treaties and everything else. So I guess it does come down to pretty fine margins and maybe some fairly subjective calls when you make that decision on which jurisdiction you're going to pick.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And also I think it's how well you understand my business. So that's why the research and, getting the information beforehand, and I always say in professional services that, people will always say, well, we're the best lawyers, we're the best accountants, we're the best funds professionals, all of this. But at the end of the day, whatever we're saying, the message, it has to be absolutely true, because it's very hard to prove that. How do you prove it? And also the area, do you know my industry, specialization? It's a very different proposition to say we are specialists in the funds industry. We understand and just address the key pain points of that specific client. And by the way, we've done it for 10 others. If I'm pitching that way versus somebody who says, I'm a general full service and we do a lot of work for clients like yours, there's no competition. But it's taking time to create that.
And I guess you're working with organizations that are sufficiently sophisticated in how to do things that they engage somebody like you. So I don't know if you have a sense for how are professional services firms and financial services firms more professional and systematic in how they go about doing their business strategy, or does it vary greatly from organization to organization, and some are systematic and professional and some a bit more haphazard?
That's interesting. I think the consulting firms have been doing this for a long time, and they do it very, very well. They take a very strong, proactive approach to how they manage and grow their business and how they grow their clients and develop their clients. So they take a very proactive approach. I think the law firms are certainly doing that a lot more now. So you will see that in the bigger firms. But what's really interesting is some of the mid-tier and smaller firms who have niches and who have a niche market, who are focusing, who are building in an area. Like, for example, I was just speaking to a company or a firm in the States, and all they do is accounting for franchises of restaurant businesses, nothing else. That's all they do, and they're the best in the world at doing that. That's a real niche, And firms like that can put in, by having that kind of focus, you can really develop it's easier to create a structure and a focus. But I find a lot of firms, and I do a lot of work with Enterprise Ireland clients as well, that would be going on the international marketplace. And most of the time they're looking for a structure and a focus so that they can develop a proposition. People always think, well, we have a marketing problem, we can't market. It's rarely marketing. It's usually about who are the ideal clients that we want and that we know we service better than anybody else. And then the second part of that would be, and what are we saying to them? What's that key message that we're saying to them? It's usually a client and a messaging problem as opposed to a marketing problem.
Yeah. And so when you work with clients that are very good at this, what is it that they do that others don't?
They have systems. First of all, they're more focused on the clients than they are on themselves. They talk about the clients. They understand their clients. They take the time to research and really understand their clients. And they do that on a systematic basis. So that would be kind of, I call them the high growth. They absolutely grow much faster than other businesses. They don't sell to their clients. They collaborate with their clients. They don't promote their own expertise. They actually are more focused on embedding their expertise to work better for the client. It's all focused from the client, not positioning and promoting themselves.
And it's interesting actually you say that, because it springs to mind for me that the Consumer Protection Code has been revised at the moment, and there's a piece in there about securing your customers' interests, so your consumers' interests. And I guess different slant in it, but a similar type of thing, that you're putting your customer at the center of your business is maybe what makes those businesses more successful and better able to grow more quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's more difficult for professional services, for those of us in this business, to do that, because we are the experts. So a lot of the time you're trying to showcase your expertise.
And how do professional services firms then that do it well do it? Because if law firms or other professional services firms where the fee earners are the talent, if you like, they're the sources of income, but then they might be very good at lawyering or accounting or whatever, but then you drag them out to be business leaders or try to identify and develop and grow a business. It's not necessarily their home where they feel comfortable.
No, and it's really, really difficult. So some of the firms that I work with certainly would have good structures in place. And again, a lot of the time, when I work with clients, it's kind of it's more a 4-pillar approach, in the sense that you'll always have a marketing department who will respond to what the partner's needs, as opposed to necessarily, and they should be a driver of the business. But really, it's not just about the marketing. You have to involve what's the financial, where's the profitability. So you have to get a good analysis and looking at the business from a financial perspective. It's not what people earn, it's about what fees are coming in and what recovery rates are like. Then you'll always look at who are the clients and markets that we're serving? Where do we focus on? What's the ecosystem? What's our internal capabilities and what's happening in the external marketplace? So that'll be the second approach. The third area then around that is, what do we want to be known for? What is our reputation? And that's where the marketing comes in, and it has to support and be linked in with the financial and the clients and markets. Otherwise, we're just driving individuals' agenda as opposed to driving the business agenda. And then the fourth pillar is the people side of it. How are we resourcing this? How do our teams, how can they help us get involved in this? Because then there's a structure in place. Does that make sense? Otherwise, it's individuals and people just going off and doing their own thing. Whereas when there's a structure and people know what role they have to play in it, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I think there is that risk and habit that a lot of firms fall into, where it's individual ad hoc pieces, whether it's, we're sponsoring this or we're attending that event, without there being the follow-ups and there being a sales funnel, as they call it in other industries.
Yeah, and sometimes it will be, it's really taking the time to look at it. But if we're doing this, now we know where we're focusing on. How will that help us deliver on the promise of our objectives? And if it doesn't have a part in that, then we shouldn't be investing the firm or the company's resources in that. We really have to justify it. So it has to be a business case as opposed to a like to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, how does that play out then with the Irish parts of international businesses? So it's something that I see a lot. Obviously, we have native Irish businesses, but we have a lot of businesses that are in Ireland but part of an international group, and there's different challenges there from a regulatory perspective and everything else. But in terms of growing your business and developing your strategy and everything that you talk about, is that relevant to these businesses, or how do you see them perform?
Well, I think it is, because they're always going, especially in this industry, Danny, people are always going to have an international, there will be an international focus. It is easier for firms who already are part of an international network. But I think firms here can be extremely proactive and establish the right go-to-market strategy, whether it's a partnership or who they work with, or also looking at areas, and I'll speak certainly for the US market because I'll be more familiar with that, outside of the traditional areas where everybody else is going. Where do we have a niche? Where do we focus? Where can we deliver it? And then just identifying who they are and targeting and developing a strategy around that. But it takes that time to do the research. Like even things recently, I was dealing with the client who was doing a lot of work in the private equity space, but like Miami is booming at the moment for private equity because so many people moved down there during COVID, and the taxes are higher in some other states. Now, I wouldn't have known that. Maybe it's not commonly known in the industry, but I certainly didn't know that until recently. So I'd be saying, oh, okay, well, it's doing that kind of advanced research so that you know where you're targeting and having it focused and having the right proposition. Because otherwise I call it a spray and pray approach, where you're just kind of, well, let's just go out there and see what happens, or whoever calls us, we just react to them. But it's thinking about it and planning it ahead.
And I guess if you're part of an international business, one anyway of your key stakeholders is your internal international colleagues and how you serve
Absolutely.
them. And that, because I guess often Irish businesses are part of the machinery that keeps the whole thing ticking over, but they're not necessarily deciding on what the strategy is or what clients they're going to target. But they do have a role.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I think that's really important, because it's not just about the board meeting when they come into town. It's like, how do we give them a broader experience for even for Ireland? And it could be something as simple as helping them plan a trip while they're here so that they get to really experience and understand Ireland. Again, if they're coming in, who are the key stakeholders in the industry that they need to meet here so that they get a good understanding of our industry? So I think, and that's not something that a CEO has time. They don't have time to make sure that they're networked and meeting the right people and getting the right information, but it's strengthening that bond with Ireland. So that's from this perspective. But then from the Irish perspective internationally, we will get the leads from them, from the organization, let's say they're in Chicago or wherever. But a lot of the time we have to go and look at their business and say, well, what opportunities are right for us that they may not think about, because we're depending on them to feed it back into us. Whereas we just need to take a more proactive and focused approach to make sure we are covering all the grounds. I think that makes a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. And when I think about the Irish part of the international business, there's a couple of things that always come up. So, for example, the regulator will think jurisdictionally and the business will think functionally. So if I'm a business, I'm thinking about my risk function. If I'm the central bank, I'm thinking about what people are in Ireland and what is their expertise, and are they sufficiently senior, and are they really running and controlling this business from Ireland? And there can be not necessarily a tension, but there are two different things to think about. The Irish versus the function of risk or the function of portfolio management, and how you balance them, and how you balance having centres of excellence that deal with tech and cybersecurity and IT and deal with due diligence visits and everything else when you have to have a certain amount happen in Ireland in your business. And I think that networking with and understanding your stakeholders and integrating yourself with them. So being part of the committees, the international committees, and as high up as you can get. And so you understand the business, and as you said, the business understands you, so that when you come with an ask, for example, they don't think you're empire building. They understand what that ask is about, and that it's the value that's going to add to their business.
Oh, absolutely, and they know who the key players are, and they feel like they're part of that. I think it's really important, and equally for the representatives here in the US, it's to build their own profile internally. I mean, I think it's really important so that they have the leverage to go to the right people at a senior level when decisions have to be made.
And so I'm really interested in that idea of helping this, the CEO, wherever it is, coming over for the meeting, and how you make the most of that time. I guess you want to meet
yeah.
the business here, but you want to meet the community here more generally, so they feel like as you said, they have a handle on the business here, and they feel important, or they feel like they understand it and are more connected, so that, you know, in due course they're willing to continue to invest in their Irish operation.
Exactly. Well, what happens is, you know, when you're here and I would have done it from the other side, when you're in the US, or the next thing you hear, your CEO or your international minister or whoever government is coming over, and he's going to be with, or she is going to be with you for 3 days. Your first thought is, what am I going to do?
Yes.
You know, and it really is, and it can be and it takes an awful lot of planning, and also you've got to be strategic about it. You know, I think it makes a big difference, because you want them to experience Ireland, and at the end of the day, it's not just about going to a nice restaurant next door, because they can do that, as I say, in Chicago, but it's just putting a little bit of extra thought into it, from a personal and experience level, and then from a professional level. Who are the key stakeholders? And certainly when companies who have set up here, when their CEO comes to Ireland or is in town, IDA, for example, are more than happy, are very good at meeting the clients or seeing how they can help. I do a lot of work on the Enterprise Ireland side. Again, it would be the same kind of operation. So it's thinking outside the box and putting something together. It's not about spending money. It's about putting thought into it and time.
Yeah. And I guess you see the effort that Enterprise Ireland make, IDA make, Department of Finance and other government ministers and ministers for state make at attending industry events, the Fund Sector 30 review. Like there is a big effort made on behalf of the state to be there to support and invest in the industry, so that when, as you said, CEOs come to town, they feel like they get a handle on the business here, and they understand that they're viewed as important.
Absolutely, and it's the same on the other side, and also the embassies abroad are fantastic and will always come in to help position Ireland and work with you as well. So I think that, you know, that's certainly that's important too, you know.
And tell me, so then, having kind of, as I said, meandered into the funds industry and financial services industry here, what is it that you see businesses here, or you see the industry here, do you think they could do better?
Yeah, that's interesting, Danny. One of the things that keeps coming up is just finding employees. It's a big challenge for a lot of organizations here. And one of the things that I think that companies here could do better would be to start building employer brand, you know, to really, like, an employer brand. And by that I mean, and I can tell you how you do it. So an employer brand is really your reputation and the visibility you have among potential employees, talent, and also referral sources. So what do they think of us versus the competitors, and why would they come to us? And I've done a lot of work on this, where we would do an employee insights, where we would talk to our existing employees and potential insights and see why they value us. And I know people will always say, oh, they just leave for the money. It has not always been about the money. It really hasn't. There are so many other reasons why people will join one organization and continue to stay there over another. You know, we just did that recently with 2 firms, and the issues that came up it was such a small issue. Now that they wouldn't change because of, you know, getting umbrellas at Easter or whatever, you know, they won't change because of a small, you know, reward, but it is just that full integrated approach, and how the firm could just make a slight shift, and it makes a big difference, because happy employees will attract other employees, and it's more important than money, I think.
Yeah, you're right, because we often do a podcast episode with Jennifer Gallen in Savvy Recruitment, so she's very much immersed in the industry, and she always say money will be a factor, but there is a premium on if somebody is in a role where they feel supported and they feel like they have the flexibilities that they need when the times come, and they enjoy what they're doing. You know, there is quite a premium on that, and they will not leave for the next role for a small increase in pay, you know, or even a bigger than a small increase in pay. Like, there's a lot of, I guess, loyalty and staff retention through happy employees.
Happy employees, and also I think once an employee feels that they have a sense of purpose, you know, that they can actually make a contribution. Most people want that. They want to feel that I have delivered something, that I have a purpose here, and that I have played a role in the growth of this organization. But if I can't see where the growth is or what they're doing or where they're going, it's very hard. Then you just get demotivated. And that's where I see the problem. And a shift in internal communications, a couple of key areas would make a huge difference depending on the organization.
And I guess so. We started by talking about being client-centric and understanding your clients' needs, and now we've shifted to being, employee-centric, or maybe not centric, but at least understanding what it is that their needs are and selling yourself to them, as opposed to always just focusing on the customers that you're trying to sell to.
Yeah. Selling and proving yourself to them as well, because they need to see proof of it. But because we're in the services business, Danny, at the end of the day, if you don't have clients and you don't have employees, no business.
Absolutely. And it can be very evident very quickly when you approach an organization, whether their focus is on their customers or their focus is on themselves. So you see where the best parking spots and who they reserved for.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an awareness of and a structure around that internal shift. And it does happen over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it certainly happens over time, but it makes a big difference to the business.
And so then, as you look forward in that and you think about what you've seen in the industry, what you've learned about it, professional services and industry firms, what's your sense for the future for the industry? What do you think the developments will look like? And are you positive that we will continue to grow and thrive, or where are the risks?
Well, certainly I think that more and more firms that I would see are looking to, they're looking at their clients, how they can better service their clients and deliver more value. And they're also looking at ways to how do we attract and retain and motivate the best employees. So in that regard, I can see a shift for people, wanting to be better. And firms of all sizes, including funds business, they are looking at that. And on the international front, I think because a lot of companies, they're set up here. Like I was doing a client insights project there a while ago and speaking to somebody in an administration company, and they were saying, God, we should be doing this for our clients. Why are we not doing this? So I think it's because the stage of growth maybe that the funds industry is at, very successful. It's grown pretty quickly. That it's now it's in a prime position to be able to kind of say, okay, now that we've grown and we've developed the business and it's here, what next? And how do we plan for that, as opposed to just reacting to what's coming in?
Well, one sector 2030, there you go. But you're right, there is a level of maturity in the industry here now.
There is a level of maturity, absolutely, Danny. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a different animal than it was 20 years ago. And I think it felt, not that it was more flighty, but maybe there was more risk that it could just all disappear and go to another jurisdiction, which I don't think, well, absolutely could happen, but it wouldn't be an overnight thing maybe. It would be maybe just a general diminution of standards, whatever they are, that would see it drift away that we have to protect against.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just, particularly the funds industry just grew, so quickly, and it's such an exciting business to be a part of. And it grew very quickly internationally, and then Ireland's reputation and how the whole industry grew, in this country to be now we're kind of on a global stage. So it is at a very interesting point.
And last word then, Annette, if there's any piece of advice you could give to somebody in a firm who's listening to this, big or small firm, or industry firm, or professional services firm, and they are thinking about strategy, or they've started to think about strategy, they've started to think about how they are more systematic in dealing with customers and retaining customers and winning customers, and likewise dealing with their own staff and keeping staff happy. What are the kind of key steps, the first thing they should do as soon as they've finished listening to this podcast, that are going to help them on that journey?
Well, I think the main thing is, why do clients or employees, why do they choose us? Why do they choose us over their competitor? What makes us different? What makes us stand out? And how do we deliver on that? I think we have to constantly ask that all the time, and not just assume that this is how we do business and why people come to us. So I think that question is just really worth asking.
And to ask it of your staff and your customers, as opposed to
ask it of your staff and your customer, why clients are staying with us. And really, we can look outside, but let's look at what we have here first, So that would be the first question. Different, companies will have different issues and will want to look at different reasons, but I always think it's, what makes us different? Why do we stand out? And unless we've got the key differentiators and a very strong proposition, we're like everybody else. If I go to one law firm, if I go to one accounting firm or a fund services company or a Menco, why would I choose you over somebody else? I think that's really, really important to answer. And as I say, it's not a differentiator unless it's true, unless it's absolutely relevant to the pain point of the audience that you're speaking to. And third, you've got to be able to prove it if you say something, So that would be my suggestion.
And on that note, with homework for all of our podcast listeners, let's wrap it up. Thank you very much for your time, Annette. I really appreciate it.
Very much, Danny.
Always very interesting to get insights from somebody who's got a different perspective on the industry. And those little tips and hints and directions are really useful to get. So thanks very much, Annette.
Thank you very much, Danny. Enjoyed it.
And that wraps up this episode of the Aquest Podcast. Join us next time. Thanks very much.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.